Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, and as I like to remind you each and every day, it expands our base. I want to deal with several different subjects today. First, Ukraine. Joe Biden spoke eloquently, effectively at the NATO summit in Washington. And the real question now is, will Ukraine be admitted to NATO? There is a concern because of Article 7, which says that if one NATO member is attacked, all NATO members must respond. But there is no doubt that the question of admission of Ukraine to NATO needs to be resolved soon. Joe Biden's term is ticking, and that means if he's not reelected and Donald Trump becomes president, the whole situation changes. So to preserve NATO, it is important to move forward quickly, and I think that is the general sense. Will Ukrainian membership in NATO help save Ukrainian independence? It's a very good question. I don't know the answer, but I can tell you that who is president of the United States will matter tremendously in the battle for Ukrainian independence. Donald Trump has said, we'll solve the problem with Putin. I don't think it's quite that easy, and that should be a major issue in the presidential campaign. Number two, let's deal with Josh Hawley, United States Senator, who now embraces Christian nationalism. Now, what worries me about Hawley is that he is a rising star in the Republican Party. To embrace Christian nationalism as a United States Senator and a leader in the Republican Party, not to mention a member of the United States Senate, is deeply concerning. I'm waiting to hear the reaction of Republicans, who should be responding with great vigor. And then there is the question of Donald Trump and who he will choose as his vice presidential running mate. Richard Nixon, in 1968, wrote this: "Before I recommended that the Republican National Convention select Spiro Agnew to be the Republican nominee for vice president, I considered more than 100 leading Republicans whose judgment I respected. I seriously considered more than a dozen very able men, all of whom were presidential and vice presidential caliber." What were Nixon's prerequisites? 4: qualified to be president, an effective campaigner, an administrator who could assume new responsibilities for the office of vice president. My question is, shouldn't that be the standard that is applied to anyone who is selected to be vice president of the United States? I mean, really and truly. And now we know who the Republicans are considering. Evidently, the field has narrowed to J.D. Vance, senator from Ohio, Marco Rubio, senator from Florida, Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, Elise Stefanik, who is the number 3 Republican on the House of Representatives, and Tim Scott, who is the United States senator from South Carolina. These seem to be the front runners, although if you had asked me in 1968 whether Spiro Agnew would be on Nixon's list, I would have said no. So you never know what's going to happen, but the qualifications for vice president are critical. Yesterday, when Marco Rubio spoke at the rally with Donald Trump in Florida, he attacked Kamala Harris. And there's no doubt that the Republicans are going to attack Kamala Harris with everything they have, whether she is the nominee for vice president or, should circumstances evolve, and she be the nominee for president. We have to think about who is vice president because, as we'll discuss in subsequent podcasts, who is vice president matters. A vice president is a heartbeat away from the presidency. And finally, I want to talk for a moment about George Stephanopoulos, who did the interview with Joe Biden last Friday night. When he was asked, not knowing he was being recorded, not knowing that he was being sandbagged, he suggested that Joe Biden should not be the candidate of the Democratic Party for president of the United States in this election. He did it based on the fact that he had spent time with Joe Biden, but it was a cavalier response. And now the ABC network, George Stephanopoulos works for ABC, is saying he spoke only for himself and not for the network. And George Stephanopoulos is apologizing for his comments. This is a tricky business, the question of the future of Joe Biden. Nancy Pelosi, in an interview this morning, indicated that the final decision needed to be made only by Joe Biden. And that, my friends, is the key. Joe Biden must make his own decision, and it appears that he has, that he's running. As we have indicated in previous podcasts, if Joe Biden chooses to be the nominee of the Democratic Party, he will be the Democratic nominee. So this is the question. In a choice between Donald Trump, a convicted felon 34 times, not to mention the other issues which he brings with him, or Joe Biden and his diminished capacity, who do the American people prefer? That is the question that evidently will be on the ballot in November. By the way, when I speak of Joe Biden's diminished capacity, he maintains there is no diminished capacity. And that is a judgment the American people will have to make. As for me, it is a clear decision. A decision of whether I would rather have a man who, without question, in my mind, has no business being president, that's Donald Trump, or a good, honest, decent man who should be, and I hope is, President of the United States, assuming his health permits, and that's Joe Biden. I know that what I've just stated is a partisan conclusion, but I believe it to be a factual conclusion. When Joe Biden says American democracy is on the ballot in this election, he's absolutely right. So we will see. We have to see how it all shakes down. I, for one, hope that the discussion is vigorous and conclusive. After all, the Republicans meet next week, the Democrats meet in August, and there's a lot of territory to cover between now and November 5th. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague. I want to point out that you can interact with me on LinkedIn and Facebook, and it's always a pleasure to receive your comments. And my deep appreciation to Gogo Zoger, the producer of this podcast. So Gogo, you have all of our votes. I am John Rothman. See you tomorrow, right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman.